virtual roundtable for the Conference on English Leadership. My name is Chris Bronke, and I'm a member at large, and I have with us today Barry Sade, as well as three members of the National Blogging Collaborative, Julie Hiltz, Chris Bronke, and Lisa Hollenbach, and we're going to talk through here a little bit about what this could look like. So with that said, I'm going to begin the interview with Barry by asking him to introduce himself. So Barry, could you take a minute to just kind of tell us who you are and what your sort of interest and expertise is with blogging?
Okay, I'm Barry Sade. I've been in public education for 14 years. The last 12 in Bernards Township, New Jersey. I've taught multiple elementary grades in multiple elementary schools in different districts. I've written and revised curriculum in all subjects. I've served on committees on state, district, federal level. I've started blogging about a little over 2 years ago. I took about 20 years off from writing, and I'm just getting back into it now. So a little rusty, but I love the opportunity to collaborate with others, which is why being with you and talking National Blogging Collaborative is such a big thing for me.
Great. Well, thanks for being here, Barry. Really appreciate it. I think, the most obvious question to start out, just, point blank, is why do you blog? We're all busy, and, the resume you just listed off, I can tell you're extremely busy. Why do you make the time to write?
Well, Chris, you kind of hinted at it in one of the blog posts that you wrote, where you said, why do you not? For me, the way I look at it is that, therapy is a copay. And time is limited. So for me, it's how can I get myself out on a piece of paper and vent and get all the things that are going on in my mind to put down, to kind of look at it in a way that would be different otherwise. Education is too big for any one person to deal with alone and in a silo. It's so important to be able to communicate and to collaborate and to bounce ideas off each other. And in the case of sometimes with you and I, to go back and forth on things and say, why do you look at it this way, or why do you look at it that way? And writing is probably the most vulnerable, authentic thing you can do, because you're truly putting yourself out there on a piece of paper and say, judge me. Now, if you're not willing to do that as an educator, you're really in the wrong profession. So you really need to kind of give everything you have every day in the classroom, and then especially if you're an ELA person and you're modeling writing and you're asking your students to write and give of themselves every day, you need to practice what you preach. I use my blogs a lot to teach. I scaffold it, use it as mentor text with my students to say, here's some of the things that I'm kind of struggling with, here's some of the things that I'm working with, here's some things I'm proud of. And I share all those different levels. It's kind of the I do, we do, you do thing. If I want my kids to write, I need to write too, and it keeps us all in a better place.
Yeah, I guess just wondering if you have a T-shirt for therapy has a copay, because I think that that's just a great point. Writing is free, and I think that's what's so great about it. So, I think one of the things that you hit on in there that I wasn't necessarily planning on asking, but I'm going to kind of do as a follow-up. You said if you're not willing to put yourself out there on paper and say judge me, maybe you're in the wrong field. How did you kind of get to a point, or what was your mindset with seeing this understanding that I'm okay being judged by my writing? Because I think that scares some teachers.
Yeah, I think a lot of things scare a lot of teachers, Chris. I think every day we need to model the way in everything that we do. We need to be authentic. We can't ask our students to raise the bar every day for themselves if we're not willing to do that on our own. So that means we got to put ourselves in very vulnerable positions, and we need to be able to work our way through that. That means taking risks in our pedagogy. That means questioning ourselves. That means reflecting. And a piece of reflecting is the writing process, being able to write down, these are the things that I accomplished. These are the things I'm working on. These are the things that I don't understand. When you finish up a lesson, I'm sure you write down notes about what worked and what didn't. What's the difference between putting that into a short blog post where you're sharing it out so other people can learn from your experience? You don't necessarily need to be a master teacher to be a master storyteller. And part of us sharing our stories is the ability to connect with one another and say, hey, I'm going through this. What about you? Those are, I look at blog posts as the conversations that we need to have by the water cooler that we may not be having.
Yeah, I think that's so great you touch on the idea of storytelling, and I think so much of great teaching actually is storytelling,
Hmm.
and taking content and making it into a narrative. So I think it's a cool parallel that you draw there. So thanks for making that.
You
Um,
got it.
you've been blogging for a couple years now, as you mentioned. So why don't you talk a little
Hmm.
bit about some of your biggest challenge, maybe the top one or two challenges that as a blogger you're fighting with even still after a couple years.
Um, I guess my thing, Chris, is I'm always afraid of offending somebody. You know, the more you write, the more you put yourself out there, the more open you leave yourself to criticism and to feedback. The more connections you make, the more personalities you meet, the more people read your stuff and kind of see themselves in there. I mean, that's part of the joy of writing, right? People read it and they say, all right, how can I connect to this? Well, what if you're sharing a situation that has nothing to do with somebody, but they read it and they read themselves into it? That's a hard thing to deal with. And I've had that a couple times where I've had peers come up to me and be like, hey, you wrote this. Did you mean me? And I have to tell them, like, no, I like you, but not enough to write about you. I'm very self-centered when I write. When I'm writing, it's about me, where I am, where I feel, what I see, and I'm putting it out there so you can judge me and tell me, hey, you're right on the mark, or you're coming from a totally different angle, or I can relate to this. It's that one sacrosanct moment where you and I can sit down and you could read my stuff and say, this is what I think, because that's like domain for Danielson. Like, let's sit here and let's reflect and talk about, all right, what did you think? How can I get better from what you wrote? Or just reassure me that I'm not totally out of my mind with the things that I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think you just have another T-shirt there, right? I like you, but not enough to write about you. I think I'd wear that every day of my life if I could. And we've been joking, talking at the National Blogging Collaborative about NBC T-shirts, and maybe that should be our phrase. And I don't know. We'll
Take
see.
it and run with it. Just send me one.
Will do.
Okay.
So I think one of the things that you and I obviously our relationship goes back for about a year or a little bit over a year now. So we've talked
Sure.
education a lot, and one of the things we've both talked about is other teachers' reluctancy to want to blog.
Yeah.
So how do you work with other teachers, whether that's in your school, your district, across the country, to just say, like, this is worth the investment of arguably our most precious thing we have, and that's time. How do you get them to
Right.
see that?
Well, what's it worth to you? How much do you want to carry around on your shoulders? How much are you willing to sacrifice? There's only so many things that we can carry on our shoulders before we become stooped, and it's how much of that do you want to live with? Education isn't something that should be done alone. You don't teach a class of one, and nor should you ever feel like you're in this by yourself. So I think the challenge that a lot of people face is either A, they're afraid they don't have anything worth sharing, right? They don't have a story worth being told. It's been told before. All the good stories have been taken. That's the one narrative. And the other one is, maybe it won't come out the way I meant it. Or then the third, maybe realize if I'm being authentically me, I'm really not that good. And I think those are those three pieces that we struggle with every day. And I think when you're willing to open up and say, hey, you know what, maybe I'm not that good, but I'm willing to share that with you, so in essence you can help me get better, that's where the learning comes in. That's the difference between that fixed mindset and that growth mindset that Dweck talks about. It's about always being willing to push the envelope so you can get a little bit better, because that's what we're asking our kids to do. And if that's what best learning looks like, then we have to be best learners too, which means push it a little bit. Maybe what you're writing about has been written before, but not.
Oh, I think did we just lose Barry there?
I'm good. You hear me?
Okay. Yeah, maybe I just had
Okay.
a freeze up on my end there for a second, but
Okay.
well, good. Yeah, I think it's interesting when you mention the fixed versus growth mindset. I think one of the things that I've struggled with a little bit. Be curious to hear you kind of talk through this, is how do you approach the conversation to try and encourage blogging with the person who you already know is fairly fixed in mindset about whether it's their own approach to education not needing the blogging reflection or their fear of blogging in and of itself?
Well, you're bringing up two really good points there. It's either A, why do I need it? I'm already great. Or B, well, what happens if I do it? What if I mess up? Well, with the people who already think they're already there, well, then that's because they already feel like they have stories to share, right? They're already doing it great. You can't change me. I'm already awesome. Just come be part of my awesomeness. So why don't you ask them to share some of that awesomeness? You have a great story. You already know you have a great story, so share one of them. And for the person who's afraid, I mean, think about the best, longest running TV show ever, and that was Seinfeld. Seinfeld was built on nothing, right? That's what we all thought. But if you look deep enough, it's all those little moments that we can all relate to as people, as human beings. Now, how many things do you relate to during the course of a day where you're working with kids or you're driving in or you're coming home or whatever, and you've got that one stray thought where you're like, that happened today.
Mm-hmm.
I could write about that. And it used to just be you had the stray thought and then you put it to bed. But now you can actually enact that and really flesh it out and have a better understanding of where that thought came from or what it actually means or how they can change you. And who doesn't want to change and become better? It's a multi-million-dollar industry. People are making hand over fist on it. And all you need to do is just sit there and be willing to write for an hour. Consider it going to the gym, but you don't have to get up.
Yeah. I love the Seinfeld analogy. One of the most successful shows of all time, like you said, built on nothing. I think that really, really does resonate with me, Barry, as a way to capture this idea that sometimes nothing has a lot of something to it.
Oh my God!
Trying
Yeah.
to get teachers to see that, right? Like every moment in every classroom around the country, in and of itself, has conversational value, and I think that's what you kind of hit at with that analogy. So I really like that. So thanks for sharing that.
Of course.
So you and I have done 2 co-blogs in our past. So I'm going to ask you whether that's talking about the ones we've written or others you've worked on. Sort of why do you co-blog, and how is that process for you different than when you're just sitting down to, like as you said, quote, go to the gym as a
Right.
1-hour writing session?
It can be harder, but I think that's a good thing. Like when you go to the gym and you don't feel like going. Or you've got to push yourself past that wall where you feel like, I'm kind of done. Let me get off the treadmill and have a piece of cake, But instead you stay on the treadmill and you keep thinking like, just I'm going to go till the next 30 seconds, or I'm going to go till that red car passes by. I think it's just when you're working with someone else, you can use their strengths to leverage yours. When you and I write together, you and I write from very different authors' voices. I'm more of like a logical, sequential, cut and dried. Let me throw a little like sarcasm in there, and maybe you can hit it. You're more like I'm a prose guy. I'm gonna throw you with my words. But I think what works well is when you can learn writing from different people, your writing improves. And when you can learn to work with different personalities, as long as in the end you're both coming from the same place, it's an opportunity for both of you to grow as well. So if anything, I urge people to co-blog more than they do because they're going to get better exponentially. Now, you need to be ready as a writer to accept that because that's a whole different level of writing. Once you can learn to find your own author's voice and you know where that authenticity is and you can come from there, that's the part when you have a conversation like you and I have had where you'll say something interesting and I'll say, hey, we should talk about that a little bit more. Let's write about that. Or when I wasn't sure, all right, how am I going to teach Robert Frost? So, now Center for Educational Leadership is going to realize that I don't know how to teach Robert Frost, but that's fine. I wasn't sure what to do. So what do you do when you don't know? You ask the people who do. So I voxed you as a resource, and I said, Chris, help me out. By doing that, I was able to put together a lesson plan that I was comfortable with sharing to my students the next day, and then so proud Then I had to then, vox you and be like, look at what I did, And then what you did is you came from another angle and you said, all right, you did this, but did you do that? And that's what co-blogging is. It's I'm writing it from this place, you're writing it from that place, and then let's merge it together so the work actually becomes even better.
Yeah, I think those are great points, and I think one of the things you talked about in there that you've got to be ready to accept the fact that it's going to challenge your writing, and I think that that really hits the nail on the head. And I guess I would ask you sort of for your thoughts on a new blogger comes to you and says, Barry, I've never blogged before, but I'm thinking about it, but I'm a little nervous. I think I want to start with a co-blog. Would your advice be for them to start with a co-blog, or to sort of work through their own writing processes and voice creation first? What do you think in that situation?
I think at the end of the day, you need to want to write. And some people need the scaffolding to say, can you hold the ladder for me? And maybe that means that you and I hold the pen together, like interactive writing looks like at the elementary level, which means you're writing some and I'm writing some, and that's fine. Then when the training wheels come off, then you go off and you write on your own. For some people with maybe stronger personalities, you might say, all right, I want you to play with it for a little bit, then send it to me, and then I'll start playing off of what you have, that rhythm. But I wouldn't say yes or no. The first step is wanting to write. If you want to write, we'll figure out a way to utilize you. Whether it's let's do it together in a Google Doc at the same time, whether we merge it, you write a little bit, I write a little bit. I never discourage anybody from writing, because if someone's open to the idea of writing, let's figure out a way to do it. Even if I'm scribing for you, let's write.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice, Barry. Thanks. So last question, continuing to be advice, and I think you kind of touched on that a little bit here. But what advice would you have for someone starting their blog today? Let's say they listened to this and they said, I've got to start writing. What the heck do I do? So Barry's advice would be?
Just write. That anything you have to put on the paper is worth it. That never think, I'm going to use a double negative. So again, I can't teach Robert Frost and I don't talk correctly. Never think you don't have anything to write about. You are you, and you bring that with you every day. And because of that, there are kids who will pay a ticket to come see you on a Saturday because of that. Because you bring that energy, that enthusiasm, that experience, you bring you wherever you go. And because of that, that makes you unique. You see the world in a different way than anybody else. And the fact that you might be stingy about it and you might not be sharing, well, shame on you, and then shame on everybody else, because we don't have an opportunity to learn from you. So what I would say is put it on paper. If it stinks, it's because it's supposed to. I've never met anybody who picked up a soccer ball or a football and was able to just boot it 100 yards. Chances are they might have missed it the first time they tried to kick it. But it's that childish wonder of wanting to be able to do more and be more and try more and willing to get up and do it again is what's going to make you better. And our whole goal as a field is just to be better than we were the day before. And if you're willing to do that, then just write.
Yeah, I think it's great advice, Barry. So thank you so much for that advice, and more importantly, thank you so much for your time tonight. At this point in time, we're gonna transfer over to our conversation and talk about you for a little bit, but mostly about your ideas. But really want to send a very warm National Blogging Collaborative thank you from the whole team for taking time out of your day to share your expertise with us. So thank you so much, Barry. No,
you got it, Chris. NBC, you guys are doing a great job. I mean, I'm going to sound like an idiot, but I'm proud of the work that you do and the amount of people that you help and the lives that you touch, because every person who now has an avenue to speak that didn't have one before, you're now helping them become a better person. And when you're a better person, you're a better educator, and you're a better spouse, you're a better husband, you're a better parent. And whether you see those trickle-down things or not, they're there. And you may never see them. You may see them 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, never. But you're doing a service, and that's important. So know that.
Appreciate it, Barry. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. All right. See you guys.
Take care, buddy.
Hasta luego.
Well, at this point, I'm going to bring back in the rest of our team that's with us tonight. And just for the sake of this recording purpose, maybe we'll go ahead and do a quick introduction. Who you are, where you're from, and what you teach or what you do in education. I'm just going to go in order of the pictures that I see here, so we'll start with you, Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa Hollenbach. I am a high school social studies teacher in Palmyra High School, Pennsylvania. I'm also a department chair and
Great,
a
thank you.
coach for the National Blog Collaborative.
Yeah, you are, and co-founder. Kristen, we'll go to you, please.
Yeah, I'm Kristen Brunke. I am a student services interventionist at Hinsdale Central High School in Hinsdale, Illinois, suburbs of Chicago. I'm also an instructional technology coach, and I work as the project manager for the National Blogging Collaborative.
Okay, I mean, kind of disregarded the fact that you're married to at Mr. Bronke, but that's okay. I think we can overlook that for now if we have to. Then Julie, we'll go to you, please.
Yeah, I'm Julie Hiltz. I'm a media specialist at Lutz Elementary in Lutz, Florida, and also working as a coach with National Blogging Collaborative.
Great. So
Chris,
I
can
think.
I hop in for 1 second before you go on? Christy is listening from somewhere. I think she might be playing the recording through the link.
Okay.
So I'm not. She did send me a text message and said that her Wi-Fi was all clogged up with something happening at school, but she is listening from somewhere.
Okay. Well, welcome, Christy.
Hi, Christy.
Well, I think, kind of like in class, after, we read a text, and I'll call that interview a text here in that sort of 21st century term. Let's just start with initial reactions. Any sort of things that struck you as insightful or not insightful or that jumped out to you. So I'll just kind of open up the floor.
I like the fact that he said, he was talking there at the end, like, put it down, and if it's bad, it'll just be bad. And it was, it's like we tell people all the time that it's okay to fail, but we don't really tell them what that means. Mm-hmm. And I felt like he kind of laid it out, like that's what failure looks like sometimes, is you wrote something, and it was just terrible once you got it out of your head. But you at least went through the process to find that out, as opposed to just stopping before you got started.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I also thought that it was interesting, the piece about, nothing is something. So when you say that you have nothing to talk about, you still have something to talk about. And I think that sometimes gets missed in the grand scheme of things.
I think the same thing where I was thinking about the nothing to talk about. Isn't it true that we all think that what we're doing sometimes is nothing, when it really could be actually quite important, because it's our daily... the ins and out of what we're doing, we don't necessarily think that it's that special. And sometimes we need somebody else, like maybe your blogging coach, to help you to discover what about what you have to tell is special that you don't recognize.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. Why do you guys think educators, and maybe it's kind of a part A and B question, why do you think educators either A, feel as if they're afraid to share their voice? And I think as coaches we've seen that a little bit, right? Some of our writers have come to us because they feel like they have some ideas, they're just kind of a little afraid to put them out there. So I guess that would be kind of the A. Or the B, feel as if they have nothing to say. Where do you think these feelings are coming from within education today?
I think there's a lot of time spent when we're talking about teacher voice and about the national voice on education. There's a lot of time spent talking about what needs to be improved and what we're doing wrong, and not enough time spent on what we're doing right or what we have to share with each other. And so I think it's hard for people to want to spend time talking about those good things that are going on because they spend so much time talking about what needs to be improved.
I feel like sometimes it comes from the humility. Like most teachers I know, just as soon as you compliment them on something, whatever it is, it's, oh, everybody does that. I don't, that's no big deal. Mm-hmm. No, that really is a big deal. Like not everybody's doing that, and part of it's humility, and the other part is they really don't know what happens a lot of times outside of their own classroom. Mm-hmm. To know that something they're doing is unique and wonderful and special, and so sometimes it takes somebody else pointing that out to them to say, no, not everybody's doing this. You need to tell that story.
Yeah, I think it goes right in line with the idea of the imposter syndrome. sometimes when we talk about our experiences, we talk about them like I said earlier, as commonplace. This is what I did this day, no big deal, and somebody else says, wow, that's so fantastic. And it's part of that isolation and those type of things that I think it all really feeds together. But the problem there is perception is reality, right? So if we perceive that what we're doing is unimportant or nothing, we're going to be less likely to share that, because who wants to hear that after all, right? So.
Yeah, I guess it kind of brings up for me a little bit of like a chicken and the egg question, though, right? Like, the national narrative can't know that these great things are happening unless people are blogging about them. But these people don't want to blog about them because they don't think they're great things, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess I'd be curious to kind of throw it out there, like how do we shift that? How can we get more teachers to realize that their nothing is something?
I had a conversation with a blogger today over Vox, somebody that's having a hard time getting started. And part of the conversation was we think when we're not somebody who's used to writing, that whatever we write has to be this big monumental piece of knowledge. And I talked with her a little bit and said, hey, how about 500 words on a page about something that happened to you and something you want to reflect on? And I think those small successes about average everyday things, kind of like a Seinfeld blog, would get people moving in the right direction and talking about their regular stories. So I think we have to shift the idea that what we blog about has to be something extraordinary and not just about what I did today.
Yeah, that's a great point, Lisa. That's a great point.
Yeah, it almost makes you want to like start a new blog site that's just called like Tales of the Ordinary, right? You know what I mean? Like, look at me, I'm average, and here's my story.
Well, that's like the book I'm going to admit that I'm reading right now, and we don't even have kids.
Can we preface this, please? We
don't have kids, but I'm reading this book called Toddlers Are, and then there's a nasty word that starts with an A. But it's all about literally nothing about, it's all just like these stupid things that toddlers do. But it's really funny, but it is a book about nothing. It's literally a book about what happens in your daily life if you parent a toddler, which is just interesting.
And I'll tell you, one of my guilty pleasures for a blogger is there's a blog site out there that's an English teacher who blogs mostly about her classroom experiences in her life, and the blog is called Sandwiches and Psych Meds.
Nice.
And she actually writes under a pen name, is like Lolita or something like that, and she has a book. And it's a collection of these crazy, funny blog posts that have such a unique voice. But again, it's about nothing. It's about her children, their disabilities, their everyday, the misbehavior of the classroom students, or a lesson that went particularly wrong, or just any number of things that I find hilarious, but are really nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You can't make some of these things up. I mean, I was just in the conversation in the hallway this afternoon with a teacher who teaches third grade, and her student was very upset because he wasn't sure whether or not he had worn his sister's jeans to school, and she's in first grade. And he's like, but they're skinny jeans, and she's like, nobody will know if you don't say anything. He's like, but I'm pretty sure it's obvious. And like 5-minute conversation, like, you just cannot make this up, right?
Right.
You need to read about this. Like, this is a great story.
I think, like, going back to Chris's point, though, about, like, how do we get people, like, that's the kind of stuff that people don't realize that we deal with on a daily basis. Like, on a daily basis, I have conversations with kids about, the most mind-numbing stuff, but that's what we do, or we answer questions that are imperative to these kids' lives, but that they haven't asked anyone else.
Well, I think, Julie, you make a good point when you share that story. You said, this is a great story. And, the English teacher in me is thinking about, elements of a great story, and great stories teach us something, right? And even though that was a story of nothing, there's metaphorical lessons to be, extracted from that, right? In terms of collaboration, in terms of acceptance of oneself. Yeah, I mean, like, I know that seems a little extreme, but I believe that those are the kind of pieces that are what we need to be hearing, right? We need to hear these daily great stories and allow us to kind of pull the lessons out of it.
Right. And she's comparing it because one of the other kids in the class, their parent died recently, and so she's looking at it as that for both of these kids, these are very serious events. Like as adults, we're like, genes not so important, but when you're 8, like that's a big deal that your friends might find out you're wearing your sister's pants. So how we not funny, but it kind of just, but it's like how can we help kids, especially at a younger age, kind of process those things and prioritize them, and not that that's not important, but how do we kind of help them get through the day so we can get on to other things and kind of keep those in perspective.
Yeah. Well, I think, it brings up a question that maybe we'll kind of connect it back to each of your lives as writers. One of the things we've been talking about is sort of inspiration. So, how do you get started with a blog post? Or maybe more importantly, when do you know you have a blog post within you that needs to come out? Well, Kristen, you get a pass on this one. Although it'd be interesting to hear from you, since you have alluded to the fact that you have one inside that hasn't materialized yet. So I think you have insight to bring to this question as well whenever you're ready. So
I think when you hear something that catches your eye, so why can't education be like Chris's post last week about Vegas, or I think that anything like that catches your eye, it's just a matter of developing it a little bit more or taking the time to write about it.
I think one of my biggest, I guess two of them, I'll say two of my biggest inspirations are when something happens in my classroom that I don't necessarily expect to happen, and it creates a bit of dissonance, and I have to think about why that happened. That is one thing. So anytime there's a juxtaposition sort of what I thought versus what I know now, or when I hear something usually from another field that really resonates as something that I can connect back to education in sometimes a very strange way, whether it's popular culture or an article from outside of the field or whatever it might be, trying to find a link back so that I can learn something from someone else.
I think that's interesting, and I also know that you're on a call with a bunch of writers when one of them gets upset that the other used his two favorite writing words in dissonance and juxtaposition. So we're going to skip past the fact that Lisa just borrowed those from me. I'm going to retain copyright for those two words, and then we'll go ahead and listen to Julie with her answer, I think.
I don't know that I believe in coincidence, but when I find that the thing that I need to write about is a thing that I keep having conversations about. Yeah. If I go a week or two and have a conversation with someone in a classroom and then have a similar type conversation with one of my friends or in a social group or at the grocery store, it's like, yeah, this is something that actually needs to be talked about because, it's coming up. Obviously, it's something that a lot of people are thinking about, and I tend to do a lot of my professional writing on trying to help people that aren't in the classroom understand classroom issues and kind of. So when I see that these things are coming up over and over again, it's like, okay, it's time to address this and put that out there for people.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. I think that's, and it's great that you're working on trying to get the education voice into the non-education sector. I mean, I think that ultimately is something we all need to dedicate ourselves to, and it's just so valuable. So I think I've got one more question for us to maybe bat about a little bit, and then we'll see where it goes. But I'd be curious for each of you, and Kristen, I think this still fits for you when we talk about specifically getting into writing. What's your personal biggest challenge as a writer? What's that one thing you struggle with consistently when you're trying to write?
I'll start first. Perfection. perfectionism. It kills the creative process, and I get stuck in it trying to make sure everything is good and perfect and just so, that sometimes it takes a really long time for me to write something because I'm worried about that. So I'm trying to learn how to let that go a little bit more, and just go with the flow of the process instead of worrying about that tendency to want to be perfect all the time from the get-go.
Mm-hmm. I would say organization and just having so many ideas or not having enough ideas to really make your point. So I think just trying to organize things into a good fashion that isn't like that 5-paragraph essay that you did growing up when you were a freshman in high school, or the bulleted list that's the 5 steps that we always see in a lot of other things.
That sounds like a blog in and of itself. Like a bulleted list of number 1 is like, don't start with bulleted lists. Ever.
Yeah, for real, for real. You can avoid a thesis sentence, please.
Impossible hypotheticals. Don't.
We see them all as a 9th grade English teacher. Some of those, what we would call, I guess, an attention getter. You see some interesting ones, I'll tell you that much.
What if you had $1 million and all of the time in the world? Well, you don't. So.
The worst one, that's the joke around our office, and this isn't 100% appropriate, but I'll share anyway because I think it's worth the chuckle. So when writing about the book Speak, and I don't know if you guys know the text or not, but the main character has been, prior to the book starting, has been sexually assaulted, and it's kind of, she's now not speaking because of that, and so on and so forth. And literally, we have had multiple students, and not a lot, but a few, who have written their attention getter with, "Have you ever been raped?" ? And then into their paper about Speak, which really then their paper had nothing to do with that, but because the book was, and they knew that using a question was a good way to start a paper in their mind, that's what we got. Yeah.
No,
so
me neither.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and then it's like, no, I have not, and I'm done with your paper.
Rewrite, revision needed.
Yeah, please start over. So, Julie, what about you? What do you consider to be, your biggest challenge or obstacle?
I think I struggle with the so what. Either is it I hate to use that. Is it informational? Is it entertainment? But that's really what it is. Sometimes it's just, I need to get this out here, like this is my interpretation, or you need some background. And I don't have an ask for you, and I don't have anything for you to do with this information other than be aware of it. And then other times it's, I really would like for you to do these things without trying to sound like I'm telling someone to do these things. And, trying to get feedback and how would you do it, or how could I do it differently. So that's
I think that's so great. It's so great to hear that, because I think that's something that at least I know my students struggle with, right? They say that one of the hardest things is that they're trying to wrap up their piece, like what's their so what? Like what's that takeaway? And so I think, part of the reason why I love working the National Blogging Collaborative and I love working with teacher bloggers is, what we learn as we work through this, right? And for me to hear that, what are you, 1,400 miles away from me as a, someone who writes consistently as an adult and is, is a very skillful writer for, a high-name organization, you're struggling with the same thing. And I think that there's so much value in that. So I appreciate you sharing that struggle. It's really great. So I guess our last little thing here is let's end with the same way we did with Barry. What would be your one piece of advice for someone who now wants to start a blog and has never done so before?
Take time and find someone to help you if you need that help, whether you go to the National Blogging Collaborative or you just find another teacher who wants to co-blog with you. Take time and find someone to help you if needed.
I think I'll go with, not every blog has to be a production. So, know that, your everyday experience is important enough to write about, and other people are sharing that. So, pick one thing that's meaningful to you today and start. And once you hit publish for the first time, that amazing feeling carries you into the next piece of writing. So I think that's important to have that first small success so that you can feel that, so you can get feedback, and then move on to the bigger pieces later.
I love that line there, Lisa. That feeling carries you to the next piece. It reminds me of when we play golf, and I'm not very good at it, but for some reason, every time you get to the 18th tee box, you hit your best tee shot of the day. So that, of course, when the round's over, you're like, well, I want to go play again, right? And I think writing has a similar effect. So I think that's cool that you shared that. Julie, what about you? What would be your advice?
I'm a huge fan of like Simon Sinek's work with starting with your why. You know, and it's kind of backward planning. Like, if you're very clear about why you're writing, then I think everything else kind of falls into place. Your audience and your format and your, you know, how frequently you do it, and your everything else falls in if you know why you're doing it. And it may just be to make yourself happy, and that's, you know, like Barry was talking about, synthesizing information and reflecting. That's perfectly okay. It doesn't have to change the world, but just know what that why is.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. For me, you know, this one is a simple one. Make sure you're having fun. You know, as a National Blogging Collaborative coach, it's the first thing I put in every email to any writer I work with. First thing I say is, you know, first and foremost, I want this to be fun for you. If it's not fun, don't do it. You know, and I think that's, you know, really important to remember. So. With that said, I'm going to just make a little plug. If you liked what you heard here tonight and are interested in getting started in blogging, you can visit the National Blogging Collaborative at www.nationalbloggingcollaborative.com. We are a free service for teachers by teachers, here to help as one-on-one writing coaches for anyone who's interested in getting started and or who's been writing for years. We can help with co-blogging and individual blogging, everything from idea creation all the way through to publication. So we're here to help. We hope you guys take us up on it. Thank you to my fellow coaches and National Blogging Collaborative people. Appreciate you taking time out of your day to chat about blogging with us tonight. So thank you so much, and I hope that everyone has a fantastic evening. Take care.
Yeah.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thanks.